After close to 3 years in the making, Toby Fox finally released the next chapter to the follow-up to Undertale, one of the most critically acclaimed indie games of all time. And its name is... but more specifically, the Deltarune Chapter 1 and 2 demo. And like anything from the mind behind Undertale, it was kind of everywhere. Maybe not on the level of that game specifically, but if you were anywhere in the surrounding gaming insiposphere at that moment in time, you would only hear the echoes of Big Shots and Banana ring back. And I, like many, was swept up in the madness. That weekend in September was like a feverish high. The surprise release announcement mere days prior, my first playthrough going well past midnight back when I had no restraint regarding sleep, and of course, you can't forget about Snowgrave. Seeing the real-time discovery of a scary-ass creepypasta route where you murder your classmate, resulting in skipped scenes and weird interactions, was nothing less than bewildering. Up to that point, the creepiest part of the game was a weird kid holding up a knife, but Chapter 2 brings out the whole no mercy run. Frosty. However, there's been a marginal but vocal amount of discontentment towards this game from less diehard fans. It's always been present to some extent, but I feel like it's grown since Chapter 2's release. To some, Deltarune is just haphazardly copying surface-level elements from Undertale, without the depth that made people fall in love with the latter to begin with. And that's not entirely unwarranted. It's hard not to wonder why the Light World is like a fanfic AU, where everyone including Asriel lives peacefully, what the point of the character creation sequence is, why resetting your save file has no consequences, or even why Sans is there. No matter how you act in battle, or even out of battle, the outcome is almost always the same, save for some differing flavor dialogue and/or mechanical benefits. The decision to fight or spare is less meaningful without Undertale's compassionate portrayal of its foes in the narrative. And when there is a significant difference, it's through taking extremely arbitrary actions without prior precedent. Why don't your choices matter? Sure, there's plenty of classic Undertale humor and shenanigans, but it sorta comes off like meandering without a clear goal in mind. Besides thwarting the vague antagonistic threat that is the knight. In the time it takes a pacifist run of Undertale to go from meeting Flowey to the end of the credits, Deltarune only manages to make it through 2 of its 7 chapters. Safe to say, its scope is much larger on all fronts. And that begs the question, how could Deltarune ever replicate how Undertale made people feel, especially without the luxury of being a more tightly packed experience? Or perhaps more specifically, why the hell have people gotten so attached to a game that's barely been able to tell its story yet? What is the heart of Deltarune? For context, I'm going to do a quick overview of Deltarune as of Chapter 2, just so my following analysis can be somewhat comprehensible. So, in case you haven't kept up, Deltarune is the self-ascribed parallel story to Undertale, taking place in an ordinary town shaken up by the emerging presence of dark fountains, host of fantastical worlds where an injury can be healed by a magic spell, and the biggest worry is a tyrannical leader driven by a simple misunderstanding. We get to explore these strange places and even hometown itself through Chris, the estranged human amongst a monster populace. And alongside fellow classmates and an oddly familiar prince from the dark, they become the center of a conflict involving the fate of the world, quite literally a shining knight in armor. These kids are thrust into the role of hero, whether they like it or not, which in and of itself becomes a source of conflict. Ultimately though, the adventures they end up going on prove to be far more enrapturing than their regular lives, the dark world being a dreamlike escape from a tumultuous reality. The game is about escapism, to an extent. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to spot that thematic through line. But what is it exactly that Chris, Susie, and others are escaping from? If you were an adolescent who grew up in suburban America around 10 to 20-ish years ago, you're gonna be absolutely flabbergasted how well Deltarune captures that collective childhood, with such an uncanny level of specificity and potency. There's obviously the town itself, but it seeps into many different aspects of the game's setting that's hard to place, especially if you haven't lived it. You know that one red and yellow toy car? What if the annoying dog did vehicular manslaughter? And keep in mind, it did all that with just its tiny little legs. There's a consistent air of nostalgia permeating not just Hometown, but Deltarune as a whole, ripe both with fond memories of Undertale's past and the not-too-distant real-world past. Beyond that, though, the town can be kind of a mysterious place. An apparent frequent subject of rumor and terror among kids is the bunker, lying decrepitly at the bottom of the town. Maybe there really is something more to those strange noises, or maybe it's just the low hum of an electrical generator, with little care given towards the overgrowth. None of this should be too surprising, given the game is spearheaded by a millennial born and raised in the land of eagles. But I think all those little things really lend a greater connection with Deltarune's setting than otherwise, even if it might not hit the same for everyone. Actually, let's place a pin in that. We'll come back to that later. You're not exactly playing a blank slate like last time, as Chris actually has a well-defined life before you get unpromptly thrust straight into it. They were always kind of a weirdo freak acting upon shenanigans of a somewhat cruel variety, and no better example of that would be towards the girl next door. Alright, it's not that adversarial, but they still both have a lot of really interesting things going on regardless. In childhood, they were best friends hanging out whenever the opportunity arose. Perhaps due to circumstances out of their control, however, they drifted apart over the years. At some point, Toriel and Asgore split up, leaving Chris with just their mother, with only the occasional get-together with the whole family, accentuated by Asriel having recently gone off to college, being a notable sore point for Chris. Truly, the Dreamer's marriage is destined to crumble in all universes. And while Noelle's parents aren't necessarily divorced, they might as well be given her father's hospitalization due to an unknown and somewhat foreboding illness. And her mother, from what we hear, is apparently quite controlling towards her, on top of being implied to be the town's mayor, who's already known to be capable of single-handedly stopping any and all crime. Even if things may seem fine on the surface, it's evident that neither of these kids are doing great. Which, as you might guess, makes the prospect of these strange dark worlds all the more tantalizing for them. That tends to be a common thread between the Lightners and the Dark, whether they intentionally seek it out or not. Despite some fantastical turmoil, the cyberworld formed by the town-wide internet outage makes Chris and Noelle's days exploring the forest seem just like yesterday. Yet, all the same, there's still that lingering feeling of immutable distance and absence. Is Chris really the same person she knew all those years ago? And is she still herself? Noelle is a fairly timid and awkward teenage girl. She might excel in her studies, but that doesn't change how helpless she can be under authority, deer in headlights and whatnot. Throughout Chapter 2, she learns to be more assertive, standing up against Queen's rule over the cyberworld, both equally for others and her own sake. She's not a peon to a greater power anymore. With the help of her friends, she's stronger now. Though, that may not be her only newfound strength, depending on the route you go down. With just a bit of practice, you can make Noelle eliminate anything in your way, because you're the party leader. Anything's possible with a ring around the finger, even if it inevitably drives the two of you even further apart, leaving nothing but a cold, hollow husk of a person. You are not Chris. You don't think or act like them. You don't really know their friends. You've never played video games with their older brother. You've never lived their life. But you can be them if you want to. You can't shape them, but you can control them. You cannot kill, but you can command. You can destroy, just as you could before. Now that's cool if I've ever seen it. And that's just regarding one character out of a cast of many. The great thing about a Deltarune chapter having a longer runtime than an Undertale area is that it gets to explore so many different ideas without it ever feeling bloated or poorly paced. Actually, that kinda makes Undertale weird to look back on. I've misremembered that game's pace as being much more extensive than it really is, more than I'd like to admit. Which I think speaks to the power of both games' approaches to their storytelling and pacing. Snowgrave is such a fantastic adaptation of the No Mercy route, and we've still yet to see the long-term consequences of the events that transpired during it. It's amazing stuff. Still though, Deltarune is only able to say so much with just 2 of its 7 chapters released. But there's still so much to be learned about this world and these characters without waiting for the next release. To get a better understanding of that, we'll need to look beyond the confines of the executable and dive headfirst into the paratext, otherwise known as the soul. Or whichever appropriate literary term would be the most fitting. As you might expect with Undertale's follow-up, there's some stuff hidden in the game data itself, but besides a silly error handler room and a conspicuously unused message, it's just normal game dev stuff. No ghastly presence haunting the code here. Mostly. But that's not what I'm here to discuss. Rather, the sheer amount of Deltarune-related things that have come out the past 3.5 years that aren't Chapter 3. Stuff that's probably Toby Fox aching to get anything Deltarune out there more than anyone else. The result of which being social media teasers, dev blogs, the Undertale Deltarune email newsletter, and...
Yeah.
However you want to describe this. To celebrate Chapter 2's 1-year anniversary, an official charity event was hosted dubbed the Spamton Sweepstakes, giving away prizes to lucky donors with in-character dialogue from the sexiest man in fiction himself, all culminating in a psychotic faux auction program announcing the winners of each prize, with intermittent skits and ad breaks for non-existent products. Although the finale is explicitly non-canon. But importantly, hidden on certain item listings is a slew of strange, interconnected web pages, ranging from teasers of future game content to kind of inscrutable nonsense. If you ever wondered where my avatar came from, yeah, it came from this little freak right here. Honestly, the Spamton Sweepstakes might be the most important text to Deltarune currently, besides the game itself, of course. And that's mainly because of a blog maintained by Holiday Girl 1225. Once again, Noelle Holiday. Noelle freaking Holiday. It's really strange. One of the first pages initially discovered discusses Dragon Blazers, a fictional video game within Deltarune's world, usually brought up to snarkily parallel gameplay mechanics, and other such things in Deltarune itself. Here, Noelle says the Dragon Blazers site was updated with a bunch of random links, similar to the actual Spamton Sweepstakes, while also specifically denoting it isn't an ARG, just silly pages fought up by minds high on fruitcake edibles. Beyond that, though, there's several more Holiday Girl 1225 pages scattered about, which shed even more light on Noelle prior to the events of the game, all coated in a thick layer of early internet charm and holiday cheer. though there's kind of an underlying anachronistic element to some of her posts. Not that a young kid having a fascination with the things that scare them isn't a universal experience, but Noelle's accounts of corrupted virtual pets and a pizza chain's mascot reeks of the early 2010s creepypasta craze to me. And that isn't a bad thing. The combination of a young millennial's whimsical writings about their interests and experience over the net, and a Gen Zer staying up all night because of a Ben Drowned reading ends up being a match made in heaven. And for being written by a 30-something-year-old guy, it's able to capture both ends of the new millennium internet with grace. Not to mention, it's difficult to place Deltarune's setting to one specific time period as a whole. Plenty of CRTs abound in the computer lab, yet Queen says she only plays mobile games. That, and the existence of Minecraft! It's merely somewhere past the turn of the millennium, and I think that's really fun. My personal favorite post of hers is one about Chris. Short and sweet, she talks about how they used to come over to her house all the time to play with her, but for some reason, they'd always end up stun-locked, leaving the living room to play on the piano in total isolation. Despite her physical and mental separation, Noelle would still feel connected through the muffled sound of the performance coming from the other side of the wall. It felt like a concert just for me. Before reading those words, I thought Deltarune's allure might have been a fluke. I was unsure how future game content could meaningfully and powerfully compound upon its themes. And I'm glad to say the Undertale guy has once again hit it out of the park, even if only for a moment. Which is furthermore exemplified by something like the newest Girl, giving eerie context to an innocuous line from Susie about Chris's apple-scented hair, or something more recent like the snowman story at the end of the Holiday 2024 newsletter, Noelle yearning for the days of forming the biggest snow angel out of everyone else, with the help of her sister. December Holiday, but usually referred to as Des, is someone brought up with fondness, what she's done for our friends and community. She's not discussed in a present tense. Des is completely absent from every corner of hometown we've seen. She's never stated to have gone to college like Asriel. She's never mentioned by anyone other than Noelle and Rudy. She doesn't even have a tombstone in the graveyard. During a spelling bee, when a younger Noelle was prompted with the word December, instead of instantly responding with the answer as the book-smart Christmas girl, she's completely paralyzed, frozen in place. This town isn't just nostalgic towards the past, it's haunted by it. So that makes me wonder, what could have possibly happened which may or may not have set off a chain reaction throughout hometown, scarring the community to such an extent that it refuses to be directly acknowledged in the present day? The truth is, well, we don't know. Just like Deltarune itself, it's a question left hanging in the air, partly an extension of being a future plot point yet to be unraveled, but also embodying the mystique and unexplainable nature intrinsic to an unfinished game. She's not merely gone, but something that can and perhaps needs to be sought out. Does that make sense? It's an odd position that Undertale was never really in, at least to that degree. The demo came out May 2013, and the full game followed in September 2015, just a little over 2 years later. In comparison, we've been sitting on this box of never-ending mystery for nearly 7 years, the ending feeling further out of sight than ever. Why did Chris create a dark fountain knowing the dangers? What's the deal with Susie's home life? What is Ralsei telling Chris when we aren't looking? Why haven't we seen Papyrus yet? Why are we collecting the shadow crystals? What the fuck did Alvin mean by that? Wingdings? Vessel? Bunker?
Check in.
And it all beckons to be answered. Or at least explored. So, that's what many fans have attempted to follow up on. Not just the cliffhanger itself, but the mystery of Deltarune, elaborating in whatever way seemed fit. Which reminds me, personally, I've never been much of a fanfiction reader. Sure, I've seen plenty of fan art, fan comics, fan music, fan animations, but purely literary works don't tend to interest me much. Recently though, a Deltarune fic caught my eye called Strikeout by Courier New, having stumbled across it the same day it was posted, more or less by coincidence. Out of curiosity, I decided to check it out then and there since it wasn't that long. And it's really fucking good. And it's so good that I highly encourage reading it before I spoil the ever-living hell out of it for the sake of this video's analysis. It's just 6,000 words long. There's a link in the description. I've only heard whispers about this person's fics among online Undertale and Deltarune spaces, and after reading this, it might be the closest thing I've seen to a fanwork channeling the spirit of Toby Fox himself, which is weird given how different the writing's tone tends to be. Strikeout revolves around, well, a revolving interview between members of the Dreamer and Holiday families, and their personal accounts of what led up to an incident that fractured not just their relationship, but hometown as a whole. And Chris's teeth too, but I'm getting ahead of myself. It's made clear Des never got along all that well with Chris, compared with her younger sister. It almost comes off vindictive, though not too much of a far cry from the playful dynamic presented in the original game. But as much as she might have not liked Chris, Des never had any intention to harm them. Growing up under the Dreamer's wing wasn't easy for them. Whatever circumstances that led to their adoption left Chris as a nervous wreck initially, with attachment issues clear as day and downright see-through by night. They were the only human in town, which only served to exacerbate their struggle to connect with others, despite their family's best efforts. But after the tears stopped flowing, they were slowly but surely able to find a place in hometown, in their own atypical and mischievous way. Not to say the quiet part out loud, but Chris here reads quite neurodivergent, even more so than the actual game, which is gonna hit real close to home for a sizable amount of readers out there. Not judging, by the way. It is what it is. On the other hand, Des is a lot more reserved. A lot like her mother in regards to being locked the hell in for whatever task is at hand. A bit of a perfectionist, but nevertheless a caring role model for her younger sister. One day, Chris and Noelle decided to go to the bunker, with their siblings tagging along. And this is where Courier's writing deviates from pretty much every other fan interpretation of a bunker incident out there. Des wasn't sucked into some void inside, never to be seen again, or snowgraved by a dazed Noelle. Rather, it was Chris who first came in contact with those cold metal doors. For some reason, they collapsed to the ground, moaning in an otherworldly pain, scaring the absolute shit out of Noelle, escalating the situation further and raising tensions between everyone. Eventually, Asriel's able to get through to them, and they all end up heading home for the night. Nothing happened, yet that dark sensation would continue to permeate the entire group. And at the heart, Chris left cold, yet colder than ever before. Whatever might have occurred that night, Noelle's mother, Carol, didn't want anything to do with it. Not even Noelle's pleading would let them see the Dreamer kids for a while afterwards. It wasn't just one awful thing that happened that led to the falling out of the two families. It's a slow burn of little things piling up until reaching a breaking point. And even the fallout itself isn't so immediate. And that feels so goddamn real to me. Things might not always be as stable as they seem, you know. On an otherwise ordinary afternoon, while Chris and Asriel were out on a walk, Des snuck up to them for a bit of wiffle bat payback for scaring Noelle. Only for Chris to hit the curb bleeding, particularly from the mouth. No one fully remembers what went down, let alone why. It's a bunch of scattershot recollections of confusion, anger, guilt, and sorrow. Nothing less, nothing more. Before they even knew it, Deaths had already disappeared. Dead, living, maybe somewhere in between. It doesn't really matter. They were never able to find her. And yet, she's still present, even giving her side of the story somewhere within the dark. But on the flip side of the intermediate are photos Asriel took throughout the years, one of the few tangible connections back to the past, when things still felt whole for them. The photographs seem like an innocuous detail, but just by looking at Courier's other Deltarune fics, it's clear not only that it's recurring, but also they're just straight up set in the same world, same events, same themes, just from differing angles. These characters are vast in their complexities, and with the right offer, they can be absolutely fascinating. Strikeout is merely one side of many, and that's fucking awesome. I aspire to have the sheer speed of a fanfic offer when a new installment is released in the series they write for, or even just the allure of an entirely new work, let alone with the delicacy and idiosyncrasy of someone like Courier New. As I'm writing the script for this very video, he just released another one based on an infamous Deltarune fic from the darkest depths of the fandom, longer than Strikeout with just 3 out of 9 chapters released. Never underestimate the power of fandom creatives. His works may not be canon, or even necessarily trying to be faithful to begin with, but the particular way Courier New's fics dive into these characters feels right in spirit, at the very least. And that's really the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Deltarune fan content, having flourished into just about every avenue conceivable. Fan games? The typical. Analysis/theory videos? Yep. Animations both hand-drawn and pixelated? Yeah. A metric ton of AU takes on chapters 1, 2, and beyond? You bet. A mod for a Sonic 3 and Knuckles PC port adapting 2 AU's future chapter boss fights into 2 traditional 2D Sonic bouts? Well, yes, of course. The list goes on, but hopefully you get the utter scale of fan stuff out there. As much as some of it can be of a dubious quality, there's still an undeniable passion behind even the crudest fan material, which can be endearing in its own right. God knows how many things I've excreted based on my favorite media solely for my eyes. We all have to start somewhere, anyways. But it's not 2021 anymore. Despite all the teasers, the development updates, the engagements with the community, and the fanworks in return, there are still only 2 Deltarune chapters. What could drive a man to spend years and years developing a game with so little to show for it, even with the assistance of a whole team? Let's rewind back to 2011. In the midst of a severe fever, a 20-ish-year-old Toby Fox would have a very, very strange dream. An ending to a game that doesn't exist. Whatever went down in said dream was so captivating that he'd soon work backwards to turn that ending into an actual game. A role-playing game. Toby would compose music, write dialogue, and use characters from a drawing by a favorite artist of his to flesh out this world. He never finished it, and from his own words, he never even made a single room. No matter how well thought through your big idea is, you'll inevitably be hit with the crushing reality that bringing it to life is insanely difficult, if not outright impossible, which especially goes for video games given the amount of moving parts involved. Despite this hardship, Toby wouldn't relent on the idea of making an RPG, which is what led to Undertale, a simpler game with less of that burden weighing on his shoulders. Coincidentally, it also became the biggest thing ever. He had already planned to revisit that other game idea infused with elements from Undertale, but now he was put under the pressure of following up one of the best games of all time. Apparently. With a small team consisting mainly of himself and Temmie Chang, they would grind away in secret to the foundation of Toby's magnum opus, Deltarune, the demo of which releasing on Halloween Day 2018. Against all odds, Toby had successfully opened the door to this very, very interesting project of his. No longer just the ideas guy, he could finally make the game of his literal dreams a reality. Well, with more than 2 people on the team, anyway. This is what's so inspiring about Deltarune, that yes, even if your project idea seems massive in scope, it can not only be tamed, but managed appropriately with little compromise as long as you have the production pipeline to support it. It will be arduous, it will take time, but it's still possible nonetheless with enough determination. How many people do you think grew up with Deltarune? Went from middle school to high school graduation in the time it's taken for Toby Fox's magnum opus to be developed? As unsettling as that sentiment might sound, it can also be taken more positively, that this incomplete game is able to resonate so much with people throughout pivotal points in their lives, and importantly give those people of varying ages and backgrounds the desire to create. Even if you can't put into words why you love a certain piece of media, you're still likely to come out of it with some creative impulse, to put something out there in the world that can resonate with others as much as it did for you. There's a reason why some film critics go on to become renowned filmmakers in their own right. Whether intentionally or not, Toby Fox has created something that facilitates the act of creation for its players, both fans and casuals alike. And maybe now more than ever, we need a reminder of the power of one guy's strong creative vision. Undertale wasn't an accident. Toby Fox still knows how to make a damn fine video game. No, something beyond that. He knows how to craft a generational experience. And it's only a matter of time for this game to, once again, envelop the minds of many back into that familiar veil of darkness, coming out on the other side with a shining creative force in their hearts. And after nearly 4 years, we finally have a concrete release date for Deltarune Chapters 3 and 4. This game still has a long way to go before reaching that elusive finish line, that dream that sparked its very creation to begin with, but with every step, Deltarune's essence becomes more and more tangible. Our perception of it may evolve in all sorts of unexpected directions, but ultimately, it's still the same Deltarune we knew all those years ago, merely presented in a new light. To quote a certain indie game developer, I'm not gonna say games can save the world or anything like that, but you could save someone's day. And when times are tough, just one more day of smiles can make a huge difference. Thank you, Toby Fox, for ruining my life and those of many others for almost a decade now. I wouldn't be the person I am today without some flowers in my life. So make sure to like and subscribe. And don't forget to